Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. Carasoft Technology would like to welcome you to our OTAVA webcast. Today, we are lucky enough to have Jason Pullman, Director of Solutions Architecture with OTAVA, Michael Deemer, Inside System Engineer with Veeam, and Jeremy Pomeraning, Security Lead in Cloud Support with OTAVA, joining us today. And Jason, I would like to go ahead and hand the floor over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for taking time out today to join us on this webinar. One thing I can tell you that you will walk away learning something today, whether you're a C-suite, a manager, a director, or down to the admin level. We'll make sure you walk away with something today. Just learn one thing, hopefully many more, but at least one thing. So I'm going to go to the next screen and really let our panelists introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves and why they're here today. I'd like to introduce Michael Deemer. Michael, go ahead and take it away. Introduce yourself to our panelists and our participants.
Of course. So my name is Michael Deemer, systems engineer here for Veeam Software. I bring nearly a decade worth of IT experience, really focused on the cloud side and also hardware and software technology as a whole.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Jeremy?
Yes, sir. Jeremy Pomeraning, and I was very impressed that Olivia pronounced my last name correctly. Most people get that wrong. But I'm the security lead at OTAVA and have about 22 plus years of IT experience, with the last 15 really focused on information security. I've got the CISSP and a host of other security related certs, but that's why I'm on the call.
Yeah, with all your certs, we probably would run out of space on this screen, but just to verify with the team here and the participants that yeah, Jeremy is well certified. I am Jason Pullman. I'll be the moderator today, just adding some color commentary where I can. I am the Director of Solutions Architecture at OTAVA. I've been here 5 years. Come from a myriad background here, both on the operations side as well as the sales side, working for companies like Dell EMC and HP. So a lot of experience, and like I said today, hopefully with the panelist here and the moderator, we can find something you learned today and you want to learn more about. All right, we'll jump right in. As everyone knows that ransomware is proliferating out there today. It's headline news. Even today in the Wall Street Journal, T-Mobile got hit for over 500,000 data entries that are out there. I don't. Hopefully, if you are T-Mobile, you might check and get to their website and find out what they're doing about it. But it's a daily occurrence. In last year, Gartner had said that by 2025, 75% of all IT shops will have dealt with ransomware one way or another. And I would probably say that it might be well before 2025. So as you can see today, some of these are well known. You've heard about them. The city of Baltimore, I mean, they had a attack through their Exchange mail server. It was their second one, not through Exchange, but the second attack they had. So even if you're hit once, doesn't mean you're not going to be a target again. So we're going to give you some insight on some practices today that will help you not only prevent it, but deal with it as well should it happen. Michael, you had some experience with some of these others here. SolarWinds, I believe, one in general you had some personal experience with. Can you tell us a little bit of details?
Yeah, of course. I feel like a lot of people may know or may not know SolarWinds was a huge breach. It really did a lot of damage because they were, a managed service provider, and they do a lot of other things. But at the end of the day, they have their RMM. It really made a lot of clients very definitive in where their data wanted to live. They just didn't want to be associated at all with the Russian attack. And as we know, just from the research that came out, I mean, it really could have been mitigated for the most part. The biggest thing was their update server had a password of SolarWinds 123 bang. I mean, from a security perspective, a lot of this could have absolutely been mitigated with internal testing, pen testing, and just making sure that all the admins were up there. Now, I always like to say that there's a lot of bad things that do come with ransomware attacks, but one of the big things is teachable moments. I think this really does put it in a teachable moment that, even these big companies out here absolutely could use some of those teachable moments that really can help everybody just kind of benefit overall in ransomware, because again, it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Right. Absolutely, I completely agree with that. We're all learning together actually in this new environment we're dealing with. Jeremy, how about taking one here for us and maybe diving just a little bit deeper with some overview from your perspective?
Sure. One of the things I wanted to mention about the Baltimore problem, in addition to the 18.2 million that it cost to restore their systems back to their original state, beyond that financial burden for taxpayers and shutdown of services, the city's inhabitants at that point were not able to pay water bills, property taxes, parking fines. They were probably happy about that part, but it caused a lot of disruption with the city, and that's one of the things you see in these ransomware attacks. There's a lot of disruption. Casilla, I'm going to talk probably a little bit more about it later on in the slides, but Casilla is probably the most recent one that's in everyone's memory, and we put a lot of trust into these vendors like SolarWinds and Casilla, and we have a lot of trust with these guys, but we're going to talk what happens when the people that we trust get compromised. That leads to a lot of damage on our end, or can, if we're not diligent and doing some of these tasks that we're going to talk about later on in the slides. So hope we'll be able to help you with that as we go through these slides.
Yeah, great perspective, and yes, coming up. So moving on here to the next slide, and this will be our only one that we're going to have, which shows some numbers, but it's very important to understand how to protect yourself. And what's good about this slide, and I believe a lot of this comes from the Ponemon Institute. If you guys don't know or haven't seen that site just yet, it's a wonderful site to go out and really keep up to date with what's happening out there. And also IBM contributed to some of the stats that we're going to see here. But the $1 million average cost of a data breach is important too. Hopefully it doesn't happen to anybody here on this call today, this webinar today, but it gives you an idea that how you need to protect yourself. And we're going to go through some things here today about that, but also as it pertains to cyber liability insurance coverages. You can see right here out of the gate, you should have at least $1 million. So good information to take back with you to understand the true cost of a breach and how you can protect yourselves. Of the breaches, in the public sector are caused by malicious attacks, 43%. So more than likely they're coming after for a reason, and there's different ways to do that. And here's the top different attack methods. It's a lot of times it's compromised credentials, getting into by phishing, and getting a response, and then weak passwords, as was mentioned in the case of Jeremy talking about SolarWinds. We'll talk about a few ways to protect yourselves from that here in the next couple of slides. Cloud misconfiguration, and HS stands for hyperscaler, because with CSPs and partners like OTAVA, we're in there helping and making sure and building platforms and providing guidance to make sure cloud misconfiguration doesn't contribute to an attack vector or attack surface on your cloud infrastructure. Third-party software vulnerabilities, we just talked about that in some of the examples. It does happen. Phishing, physical security, and malicious insider, as you can see, round out the top 6 for the top malicious attack methods. Jeremy, from your perspective, what do you see happening the most here that maybe is gaining momentum that you could speak to here?
Well, I think, we've talked about public sector data. The data itself, just due to the nature of the data, is very high risk. You may have secrets, or, you may be a government entity, maybe someone with a really high profile that maybe a hacktivist wants to embarrass you. Nation states may be trying to get your secrets. There's a lot of important data that you have there. And there's a lot of reasons that people want to get after you, and there's so many new avenues coming around. These new supply chain attacks are kind of on the forefront with SolarWinds, Casilla, which we'll be talking about a little bit, but that's kind of a newer avenue. But then there's also the old avenues. Everything old is new again. The social engineering, the phishing, like you mentioned, it's the same methods, maybe some different exploits that we're seeing, but same methods. And there's a lot of things we can do to try and minimize those. And we'll speak to those as we go through the slides. But one key thing I would note here, the average downtime due to a ransomware attack is 21 days. And the average average number of days to fully recover is 287. So keep that in mind. You know, you don't want to be that stat. You don't want to be average. You want to be above average.
Be proactive here. I'm hoping some of my furniture of the house, the old furniture, becomes new again. So I'm waiting on that as well. So that
Exactly.
brings home with me. Michael, how about you?
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I see a lot. And one of the biggest things that I really see is security flaws, where everybody always has top of mind. Everybody talks a big security talk. They always want to implement always the latest and greatest, but sometimes when actually implementing it, they don't do the best. They don't understand there's a lot of caveats to that. They don't understand that maybe there is some missing holes that they thought they had secured, and unfortunately they just didn't. And a lot of that really kind of boils down to kind of the number one, which is 19% of credentials. I see a lot of things happening with, end users, admins, thinking that things are secure and they have a very unique or specific user credential that, shouldn't be able to be hacked from, somebody. And unfortunately, it's pretty easily be cracked when they start social engineering or anything else of that facet.
Very good. Okay. All right. Thank you for your input there. We're going to move on here. Like I said, there's going to be something for everybody in here. We might get a little technical on times, but I promise we're going to keep an even keel here as we go through this. So Jeremy, I'm going to kick this slide over to you to talk about infection sources, just to understand, what our attack service may look like and how, ransomware is penetrating some of those vectors.
Sure, and as we said earlier, what soldiers do, it is the same attack vector. Email attachments and social engineering and the things that we've heard about for years. Removable media devices. I've been in companies where we've dropped USBs in the parking lot, and you'd be surprised how many of those get plugged in. If you put a title on it that someone wants to look at, beach pics or whatever, family pics or executive salaries, put something like that on there and see how many people click on that, and it will amaze you. But malvertising, social media, all these different ways to get people to click on something and take some action. But all of that we're seeing, like I said, the supply chain attacks are starting to be a thing now that we probably didn't think about much 2 years ago. I didn't ever think, if I'm going to engage this vendor that's really good at patching software, they'll never get compromised. I never thought that way, but now you have to think about that. Even when you're thinking about terms or infection sources. So one of the headlines a couple of days on the SANS News Bites was CISA warns admins to urgently exploit or urgently patch Exchange proxy shell bugs, because now there's this new file lock ransomware that's out there. File lock, if you haven't read about it, you can Google it real quick. It's the newest, the latest, greatest. And if it's not file lock, it's going to be something else. But these methods just continue to be the way to get this ransomware in. And we mentioned ransomware as a service down here towards the bottom of the slide. Ransomware as a service, it doesn't even require technical skill. There's criminals that can go out there and buy ransomware as a service. They don't have to know what they're doing, really. And with that model, you can have some, little guy that really doesn't know what he's doing go buy ransomware as a service and come after your company. So it's easy these days.
Yes, and it will continue to become more and more prevalent and probably front page news on a daily basis.
Right.
Agreed. All right, Michael, any comments here?
Yeah, so I love that Jeremy brought up the removable media. I think this is one of the best studies that I've really kind of dug into, where 49% of actual people went and grabbed that USB. I would actually like to know if any of them put it in a virtual sandbox, right? Most people, they see a virtual, thumb drive. They don't know if it has Bitcoin of $1 billion or something that they can actually have tangibly going down the road. And I think this is one of those things where, human curiosity kills the cat. And that's really what it comes down to. And also one of the other big things that I like to bring up is ransomware as a service, right? Like you said, it doesn't take a genius anymore. It doesn't take a black hat to come in there and be very malicious and do very, dirty things to the company and the organization and the network. It could be Joe Smo down the road that has no idea really what these do, but he found a way to do ransomware as a service. And yeah, he's going to collect that data. And at the end of the day, he might not know what to do with it, but at the end of the day, you're still getting breached. And that's the key.
Right. Find one with $1 million. Wow. That kind of piqued my curiosity, actually. So yeah, thank you guys for commenting. And I also wanted to mention, I see there's one question in Q&A. We're gonna get through these slides. We're going to end a little early, and we're going to have a Q&A period. So we're going to have all the panelists be able to answer questions at the very end. So we're going to have plenty of time for that. So if you would load up the Q&A as much as you want, and we will get to those as soon as we finish through these slides. And like I said, we'll finish early, so we'll have plenty of time. All right, we're going to now take you into more of what to do, best practices from our panelists' point of view.
All right, Jason, you want me to take this one?
Yeah, I would. Go ahead.
All right. Obviously, these are the best practices that you've heard for years. Keep all software, antivirus, and malware solutions up to date. Patching, perform threat analysis with your security team, pen testing. Like Michael mentioned earlier, when we put these boxes in, it's not a set it and forget it. We need to test these things. Make sure that we didn't leave a default password on there or something like that. We want to test and make sure. So, it's not just throw it in and hope that it works. We need to actually test and validate that it's doing what it's supposed to do. Strong passwords, different credentials. You don't want to have the same credentials across the enterprise in multiple applications, because if I get one password, I've got your password to multiple systems and software. So, try to have different passwords there. Mixed type repositories will probably, Michael may touch on that a little bit. Monitoring tools for this stuff, file integrity tools, look at critical files and see if there's changes to those files. We need to be able to track that. I don't see it on here, but logging is big. We need to have logging for sure, and central logging, because usually if a hacker would get on a system, if he's really good, he's going to cover up his tracks, right? But if we have central logging, then unless he gets access to that, then we still got the log somewhere. So we want to have that. We want to have it backed up. We want to make sure that we're keeping all that. But even with all of that and all of these things that we can do, let's say maybe your users aren't like mine. Maybe they're really good and they don't click on links, and maybe your patching isn't like ours and you've got all your patches up to date and man, you're on it, you're on top of things. Well, what about your vendor when they get attacked? Casilla, for instance, maybe they were your patching solution, and then all of a sudden they get ransomware and it propagates to you. Well, boom, nothing you did, but you just trusted your vendor and now you've got ransomware. So, at that point, you're going to have to rely on someone like a Michael with Veeam to get you recovered, and OTAVA, and together they can help you with something like that. So I'll hand it off to you, Michael, there to kind of speak to that. But
yeah, of course. And that was a ton of good information, Jeremy. I mean, tons of very good, useful information I think anybody can take and go apply to their own environment. One thing I really want to touch on is mixed repositories, especially from the Veeam perspective, right? Not just having your Windows and your file-based or your NAS type repositories. One of the biggest things that I like to really mention when we're talking security, top of mind, I'm talking about Linux repositories all day. Something that's on-prem, that's tangible, that we can hit as an immutable target is huge. So that way we don't have anybody that can even get in. No malicious insiders, no malicious actors. Everything's going to be protected there. And then usually what I like to do is I pair a Linux on-prem immutable repository with an object storage immutable repository as well, just in case. There's things that always happen, right? There's always those light cases where you have physical connection to the box. Well, I don't care what software you have physical connection to the box. You really are really limited what you can do from that aspect. But with object storage, you're just not going to touch it. I always like to say, I don't care if you own one of the big 5,000-pound gorillas or anybody out there. It's an API call. Everything's locked down, and it's just not going to be able to be touched. It's write once, read many, and that's what makes it great. And that's what makes it so makes a lot of admins sleep better at night. Coming from myself, I was an MSP admin before coming to Veeam, and having that was huge. Just having that kind of peace of mind so I could sleep at night, knowing that even if something happened on-prem, I have that backup solution that's going to be able to be pulled down. And then, of course, I'm going to talk a little bit about 3-2-1. I'm not going to go too much into it just because we have a slide here on our next one. But very generalistically, it's keeping 3 different copies of your data, 2 off-site, 1 that's completely offline, right? And making sure that we test those backups, because testing the backups is honestly one of the most critical parts. Taking a backup is obviously critical, and making sure that we do that. But testing those backups, and my particular eyes is just as heavy load, because what happens if, cool, I took a backup and maybe something did happen. You're 6 months, 12 months down the year, and you're in Q3, and you're like, well, crap, we did find that we have ransomware, and we have to roll back a couple versions, and you never tested it, and it's still exposed there. So testing so that we have zero recoverability errors is absolutely mission critical.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would ask that everybody, all of our participants, that ask your admins and your engineers that you have on staff, ask them about the 3-2-1-1-0 and see if they can explain it to you. And if they can't, have them call OTAVA, help them out and see if we can see what else we can help with. Happy to do that. A question for you guys to comment on. So using strong passwords and different credentials, that's just really one way to protect yourselves with authentication methods. Michael, with your experience in some of the on-hands experience you were telling us about, did the folks that were either penetrated, were they using multi-factor authentication?
For the most part, unfortunately not. And that would be a lot of the big barrier, right? Is that MFA, multi-factor authentication, is absolutely huge. I feel like it's that extra bodyguard, that extra layer that gives you that extra oomph, right? You just can't go and get an admin password and go, cool, I got the password, I log in. With MFA, somebody has to verify it, and most likely, a good percentage of the time, that's not going to be able to be happening because it goes to their cellular device. Or some type of other extremity that is outside of their particular reach at that point.
Mm-hmm. And I have to use multi-factor every day to get into my Office 365, my applications, network, VPN. It's very important to understand and how to effectively use multi-factor authentication. That might have helped in a couple situations you were in where you were remediating those efforts, I'm sure. Also in here there's a good bullet in here about incident response team, and make sure you have that capability, and not only establish about who the team is, the makeup, and who's going to be on that team and what they're going to be responsible for, but also do tabletop simulations. But meet regularly to understand the team, what the responsibilities are, and not only that, what's out there, what's happening, how to protect yourselves, your attack surface, but also what you're going to do should you encounter ransomware, because that's just as important. OTAVA, our team, is on several of the stakeholders in response plans for many of our customers. And so that's one thing. Make sure your makeup of your response team for recovery includes all your stakeholders to make sure you can get back online as soon as possible. So we didn't touch on a lot on recovery here, but there was good mention about the 3-2-1-1-0 rule, and not only testing the backups, making sure they're immutable copies, the worm, if you will, I'm sure everybody has heard that acronym, is very valuable for backups. In fact, just in the last, I'm going to say, let's just say recent, we had 2 of now our new customers come to us with ransomware. We're able to get those recovered into our cloud and work with them to protect their infrastructure. All right, I'm going to get on to the next slide. Thank you, panelists, for your comments on that. Michael, I'm going to hand off this next slide to you to kind of walk us through maybe just a little bit of more detail. And we don't spend a lot of time on this because we just went through it, but any other things you want to add to the
Yeah,
3, 2, 1?
absolutely. And I know I kind of already touched on it. And of course, some of you guys might be used to it. Some of you guys may have heard this 1,000 times. Some of you guys might have implemented this, right? This is a very generic rule overall, but at least from the Veeam perspective, having 3 copies of your data. In this particular regard, at least for Veeam side, we're going to have 3 active fulls of your data. And that's key, and not just having incremental data. Having those actual tangible fulls of the environment is key. And then having 2 different forms of media, whether that's, a spinning disk, SSD, NVMe drives, and then also pairing that with some type of other tangible disk or tape, right? Some type of other media that we can actually move that data. One offsite, absolutely with the top, of making sure that we can target the Cloud Connect server, making sure that, our backups are not just flowing from on-prem, but they're also flowing from on-prem either directly to the Cloud Connect server, which is making that offsite bounce, or potentially landing and then copying that data, or just moving the entire chain off. Very critical, just depends on the architecture and how much data we want to keep and where do we want to keep it. And then the biggest one is, making sure that we're testing this particular data, right? And I can't stress this enough. I think this is one of the most key parts of this. Is not only is the backup great, you have to have that, but you have to have that to test it. Testing the backup, in my eyes, is something that ultimately needs to be done maybe on a daily, maybe on a weekly or a monthly basis, but making sure that you have that kind of plan in place. I can't tell you the amount of times where I've had an admin, on an email that doesn't understand that your back's up against the wall, and they don't know how to mitigate against that. So testing these plans, making sure the backups work, is absolutely mission critical to the overall fit and function to the organization as a whole, and making sure that your daily your daily jobs, just in general, your email's still there, your app server that you were developing yesterday, all that type of unique data is still going to be there and be available for the end users.
Yeah. In geo-separation of the data, immutable copies, you mentioned that, all good stuff to recover from. And to be quite honest with all the participants here, this is the most effective way for recovery, quick recovery, and quick remediation of ransomware. So I can't say that enough, and that's why it's really important you understand the 3-2-1-1-0 rule. So as I mentioned before, let us know if we can help in any way, shape, or form to help you implement that. All right, going into zero trust. Now zero trust, I'm going to have the panelists speak to this. Really, it's almost like cloud it was a few years ago, where it's, okay, cloud's this to this sector, it's this to this sector, this to this sector. But really, it's treating every identity and device as a potential threat. And once you start thinking like that, you can start to break it down of where you need to focus your attention, or where on that attack surface vectors that you need to focus some more attention on. But Jeremy, would you talk about zero trust, what you've seen out there, or what people should be implementing, and how to go about this to really understand zero trust a little bit better and make sure it's implemented in their environments?
Sure, and I think zero trust really came about a lot because back in the old days, 2006 or so, back in the old days, we talked about perimeter protection and protecting our environments from the outside world and all this. Well, the perimeter is gone. There is no perimeter anymore. People, especially with the COVID situation in 2020, if you weren't working from home before, now everybody has that ability, it seems like. And if they don't, I don't know how they're in business, but you've got remote workers, VPNs, all that stuff. There is no perimeter anymore. And so zero trust is very important. And you can read the slides here and see the steps, but I'm going to give you an example of something that I ran into, probably my first ransomware event that I ever ran into. The problem was, it was for a healthcare organization, and the ransomware spread like wildfire because we weren't doing any of these things properly. Multi-factor authentication, you mentioned that earlier, a couple of slides ago. It could have stopped the whole event to begin with, because some user was clicking on this or that. If we had multi-factor authentication, there was no further propagation because you couldn't authenticate. But because multi-factor wasn't there, the thing started propagating. And, the endpoint devices were secured with antivirus, but then there wasn't a signature for that. And that's why you want these different steps here. The old term used to be defense in depth. Now we're calling it zero trust, but it really is layers of defense. But nobody at that point, when we got this ransomware, had any role-based access in place. All the shares were open to everyone, which is a terrible idea. You never want that. But the everyone group had shares open so it could spread like crazy. There was no authentication, no role-based access there. So no roles were defined and no, nothing at all there. So there was no file integrity in place. We talked about that earlier, monitoring for critical files for changes. And speaking of securing endpoint devices, that doesn't just mean install AV and you're done. Antivirus is not the end all be all and can be easily bypassed. And if you want to see some examples of that, go out and look at Black Hills Information Security, Google them and look for their sacred cash cow tipping and their webcasts on bypassing antivirus. And you'll find out real quickly that antivirus it's okay, but it's not the end all be all. I'm not saying don't put it on, you need it, but it can be bypassed. But securing your endpoints is also disabling unnecessary software that you don't need, getting rid of that, disabling user accounts that you don't need, removing services that you don't need or disabling those. Anything that has the potential to be exploited. Implement host-based firewalls. These are some easy things that you could do. But back to the outbreak, guess what else the company didn't have? They didn't have logging. And so when that thing started spreading, we were looking around going, where's it spreading? Where's it coming from? Where's the initial source? We couldn't find any of that until we turned to logging. We had to get logging in place. We had to start looking through logs, trying to find out where this thing was going as it was spreading. So you don't want to be in that situation. And to top it off, they had a really poor backup strategy. They ended up losing files because of that. And it's critical to implement all of these steps here because had we had any of these steps in place, we might have caught it at step one. We might, if we didn't have MFA, we might have caught it at step two. We might have caught it at step three. There's multiple layers there where we could have caught this or known that a ransomware event was happening, but it was too late. And there was nothing we could do because we didn't implement any of this stuff. Fortunately, it's in place now in that organization, but it wasn't at that time. And we've talked about all this good stuff that you can do. At the end of the day, it comes down back to Michael. Do you have a good backup and recovery strategy? Because what happens when the next thing, ransomware was kind of a new thing that came out and started encrypting files nobody knew about. If you didn't have good backups then, you were in a mess. And same thing now. What if something comes out that's not ransomware and something that gets past all of our defenses that we don't know about, something that's going to come out next month? Well, we need to depend on people like Michael and OTAVA to make sure that we have a good backup and recovery strategy so that we can recover if something does get through. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah,
it certainly is. You bring up a couple of great points. And one is that the edge has disappeared, especially with what's happened with COVID in the past year. The edge is now distributed, and a lot of companies and a lot of entities out there had to scramble to keep the doors open, the business flowing. And so the edge went way out, and here we are. So securing endpoint devices is not just premise devices, right?
Right.
It's all remote devices that are out there as well. So when you say secure endpoint, it's a posture checking as well to make sure those, if they don't have a true BYOD policy, that they're doing some sort of posture checking somewhere along that access control layer, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned it's not just one thing. We just can't install AV anymore and feel very comfortable with our security. it's a whole host of things that we need to do to really protect ourselves now. And a lot of this really covers, I really like this graphic because it really covers some of the ways that we need to implement to protect ourselves.
Right.
Along with the arrows down at the bottom is, it's exhaustive, might be a little dramatic there, but repetitive training and reinforcement with your end users that watch out for this, make sure you don't do that, and on a repetitive basis, just to make sure they're aware and you're doing everything possible you can to educate your end users as much as possible that to protect themselves, either from phishing emails or looking for true domains when emails are being sent out to, and also what to do if they're suspicious. Send that to the security officer or your response team members to ask and open up that dialogue and that communication channel. I'm going to move on because this really segues into the next slide about what happened with COVID and our distributed workforce now, and then also the erosion of the edge as we spoke to. Here's some best practices that have been identified to kind of help you maneuver and protect yourselves now that we have that no longer have that defined edge anymore on the network. And some of this, we given a couple plugs here, and again, I hope everybody's learning something listening to these. Ponemon is one that you ought to take a look at. Jeremy, you mentioned SANS. There's a particular SANS site that you like.
If you go to SANS.org and type in ransomware or anything else that you want to search for, you'll find a ton of resources there.
Yep.
SANS Institute is great.
Yep. A lot of this, I was looking through this and I read a magazine called RWS. It's Remote Work Solutions, rwsmagazine.com. Check that out. There's a lot of security practices in there. They write about remote work and how to protect yourselves. But Jeremy, I'm going to have you add some commentary to go through a few things here on what you've seen out there and where you see the most value in this list here or what you believe the best practice is in protecting companies or entities from
Sure.
that edge erosion we're seeing.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, for public sector, you can also look at CISA. We didn't mention that, but CISA has a lot of guidance that's really good. And especially they just came out with some new stuff on ransomware that you can look through on how to prevent it and how to recover from it. So there's a lot of good resources there as well. But like we said, the perimeter is gone, and it has been gone for a while with remote workers. 2020 maybe accelerated that. But we used to talk about how to secure it. Now our office extends to someone's home. As you said, security awareness is a big part of it. Security awareness training, it's a big deal. And I found with security awareness training, as you train your users almost become little security monitors for you too, because they will start reaching out to you and say, hey, I saw this. This is strange. What do I do? And so as you train and do security awareness, it seems like a lot of the users really become monitors out there for you, so they can help you as well by pointing out things that just don't look right. But going back to home networks, there's easy wins for people that you could do, like changing a default password. I know Michael mentioned that earlier on other systems. Change a default password. You would be surprised at how many people never change a default password on their wireless router at home. Or any equipment at home, but wireless in particular, because I can sit out there with a $13 wireless card from Amazon, a free Linux disk that I download that boots up on my laptop. I can run a $200 or $300 laptop with this little cheap hardware and start trying to hack into your wireless system. If you've got default passwords, if you've got easy passwords, it's so easy to crack. And if you've done any wireless auditing, any out of that, like I have, you would know how easy it is to crack. But attackers have the advantage because they can crack it offline. They can go grab your password hash, take it back home. They've got weeks, months, a year to crack your password, come back and then attack you. It's very easy to do. And I heard a stat that they're really expecting the wireless attacks to ramp up in 2021 due to all the home workers. So they're expecting a ramp up in that. And, if you don't do the easy things, changing default passwords and securing your home routers, things like that, you're just going to make it that much easier. It's surprising to see people's faces whenever I give security talks and I talk about the different passwords and I say, do you use your address, your zip code, your phone number, dog's name, kid's name, birth date, anniversary? People want to run out of the room immediately and start changing stuff. They go, I can't believe you know all this, but it's easy stuff. And that's easy stuff to fix. Don't use dictionary words, things like that on your passwords. But another easy win is multi-factor. Like we said, OTAVA can help you implement that. And that's a pretty easy win as far as getting that done because when they do put in their address and their zip code and their phone number and their dog's name, if you allow them to do that, when that does get compromised, at least the MFA adds that other layer of protection, on those things. So, you don't want the attacker to get in and get admin credentials, then off to the races, especially if he can attack your organization through someone's home wireless network and use that as a jumping off point. You want to try to avoid that at all costs. And another thing that I'll kind of segue into, it's a new thing that we have going on is with this BYOD stuff, it's hard to secure, which we mentioned, but Jason could probably jump into this a little more, but we have a new offering that's desktop as a service that can help you with some of these problems that we're trying to mitigate at home. And that's one of our new offerings. So I think Jason could probably take that one on, tell you a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I will in the following slides. But
okay.
We all have to be good stewards, right? It's just a quick story. We were at the bank opening accounts for my 16-year-olds the other day. And when they were asked to create a password, you know what they selected? I kid you not, they were going for their birthdays. And I said, make sure it's not your birthday. And they all were backspacing. We all have to be good stewards, not just for our family members, but also with our coworkers to understand that. And if you hear of anything like that, because that's going to help propagate good practices through the workforce, as well as VPN. As I mentioned earlier, with MFA here internally to OTAVA, to all of our systems. But you mentioned the wireless out there. I don't get on anything unless I'm on a VPN. Help mitigate some of that. So
yes.
Great tips here. Michael, anything from your experience, either operation days or currently that add here?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you guys have covered the slew of things here. But I think, again, most of this stuff, your firewalls, all your security measures are going to be able to catch a certain percentage of this. But I really like to say that just like Jeremy said, once you train your employees to become those watchdogs, they start raising red flags. And the biggest thing is they take an extra second look. It might not be that they understand that is a security flaw, but having that second, just 2 seconds of clarity. Hey, is this ransomware? Hey, is this trying to, social engineer me backwards to get my passwords, is huge. And I think that is one of the biggest things. And also, again, to talk about a little bit, since everybody's, work from home with COVID, the amount of things that I've seen from the social media platforms that people will put out there, that it ultimately is, they're basically their passwords. There's so much unique data that they put on these social media websites that it doesn't take a brainiac to be like, I wonder if their password's going to be over here, when they're just writing these long essays about all their personal information. It's really at fingertips, and they can really start to mitigate a lot of that stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah, agreed. As Jeremy mentioned, so we've seen also that proliferation of the eroding edge for people if they don't have a good solid BYOD policy. Desktop as a service has really taken off in the last year and a half, as I know you guys can all imagine. So I'm going to transition here. We are at 47 to the hour. I'm going to get through, or 13 to the hour. I'm going to get through some slides here just about OTAVA, because I just want everybody to know what OTAVA does, because you might say, hey, I've never heard of OTAVA. What does it mean? We've been in business for over 30 years. We are constantly adding services to our portfolio. You can see our pinwheel here. Today, we talked a lot about Cloud Backup. We're a platinum partner with Veeam, work with them very closely. Michael, his team, and several other teams there at Veeam. We have their whole entire product set on board and deliverable, serviceable, supportable. 24/7, 365 here at OTAVA. In addition, we have data centers all around the world. We have clouds, private, reserves, shared, and cloud storage. And we mentioned DAS just a little bit ago, how that's really taken off for us, desktop as a service. So you can get control and maintain control over those end user devices and have some control, do some posture checking, make sure you understand what's going on. And because a lot of that is, right now, what's going on is a lot of shadow IT because of all those distributed devices that are connecting to your network you don't know anything about. So desktop as a service is really taken off. All of our data centers comply to the following compliances you see over there with HIPAA, high trust, PCI being really one of the most stringent out there. It's not just myself or anybody at OTAVA telling you about this. We are audited from a third party, and we have those certificates available should you need to have those for your portfolios of information when you do your due diligence on which partner to select. So that we have all that available and how we follow those practices. So as I mentioned, I'm going to slide through these. There's only 2 more here about our products, and then we'll get into Q&A. We look at it as a data protection suite and look at that. We break it down by really RTO and RPO, recovery time objective, recovery point objective. So if you're hit by ransomware and the CIO is sitting at your desk, which I've been there, and he's saying, how much longer? I need to tell the board how much longer, how much longer. That's where this business critical really comes into play. And what we do, we work with our customers to understand and tier this out and help them tier the applications out in the type of RTO we're looking for, because in any event, downtime is damaging, not only to the revenue, but also to the brand name. And in the public sector, same thing. You're not able to deliver a service to your end users. So part of our services we go through and break down, we use our pyramid here of data protection to make sure we deliver a comprehensive plan and solution to deliver to your companies, your business, your sector's needs. Just a couple things about backup. It's a managed service that we have. So if you say, well, I just don't have a lot of staff here, I need somebody to manage that for me. Because I got my folks working on either revenue generating or creating uptime projects or better uptime, delivering our services to our end users. OTAVA has those managed, and we can be an extension of your IT team. Try it for free. It's always, let's kick the tires. Call us if there's anything we can do for you. Try you out on a 30 days if you want to take a deeper dive and learn about any of these type of solutions and or approaches to delivering these solutions. Give us a call. You can kick the tires. Be happy to help. Our team here is you can schedule a demo with a rep today. Mr. John Borchelli, Mr. Garrett West, and Mr. Tony Santini are here to help and pull in either myself or a member of our architect team to jump on a call today and start seeing how we can help listen to your current issues that you may have and see if we can come up with something to work together. Getting through that, we have 8 minutes left. So Olivia, how about we open it up for Q&A now?
Yep, that sounds good.
I see we have a few questions in the Q&A. Are you guys able to see those?
You want to read them all for us? See here. All right, I'll read these off. We have 4 in there. We can take more. Can you discuss data vaults and any recommendations when you have to keep PII in your environment? Data vaults. Now, Michael, you touched on that a little bit ago, talking about mutable copies and worm, some Linux drives. Could you take that question for us or give us your comments?
Yeah, of course. I think a lot of that really kind of stems from, at least on the Veeam side, to have a very diverse ecosystem, if we can, of course, to the data that is at rest, right? So at least for Veeam, just a little tangent here, all of all of the data is going to be encrypted with AES 256 by default from end to end. But to really make sure that these data vaults are secured is one of the most high priorities, at least for here at Veeam. And then what do we usually do? We pair those with a Linux immutable, or we have some maybe high-end arrays that have snapshot capabilities, so that they can send data between the two arrays, making sure that they're redundant and potentially offsite, so PRA to DR back. This is very good for just making sure that we're encapsulating that data and making sure that it's 100% secure at all times.
Yeah, a good point. Jeremy, could you talk about another part of this question here? Recommendations when you have to keep PII in your environment, maybe like a FIM, or talk about the importance of logging as well.
Specifically FIM is a really good product because you can monitor all those critical files for any changes. So I love their product for that. And for logging, centralized logging, I think, is key, because when you do have anything changing, like I said before, if someone were able to get on a local system, change logs, you definitely want a central repository that you could go back to. Did I say repository that you can go back to and look and find out and see what happened there. You don't want to be stuck with all your eggs in one basket, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I hope that answers the question. If not, we have contact information here where you can see, you can just schedule some time, and we can actually take a deeper dive if you'd like. Can you discuss ransomware insurance? I can't. I'm not legal and I'm not an insurance agent. What I can tell you is that I did make mention of cyber liability insurance before, and I showed a stat where a typical breach cost about $1 million on average, if there is such a thing as averages, because they're all different. However, here at OTAVA, we have cyber liability insurance, and you can get it from all the way from 1 million on up. We have a tremendous amount of coverage here. So I don't know about ransomware insurance, but I can just tell you cyber liability insurance. If you Google it out there, you can see a lot. And it also, most of them cover data breaches as well in there. And so they're going to have clauses about data breaches. I hope that gives you some insight there for your ransomware question. Mike or Jeremy, any other comments on that?
I'm like you. I can't comment a whole lot on cyber insurance other than you probably need to have it these days.
Yeah, and talk to an insurance specialist.
Right, talk to an expert on that.
Let's see, a good hacker be in your system for a year or much or longer. Yes, they could. It could be internal, somebody internal that's sitting there at a keyboard on your network. Yeah. Of course, backups are great, but what is the recommendation for air gap backups or offsite? Michael, why don't you start with that?
Yeah, of course. So yes, absolutely. Some ransomware could absolutely be sitting in your environment dormant for way longer than a year. Some of the biggest cryptowares and like the WannaCry, exploits out there, sometimes they're dormant for like 5 to 10 years until they absolutely get everything they want, and then they start locking things down like on just a turn of a key. Now, how do we prevent against that with air gap? And this is something that's absolutely mission critical. And this is where we could have to have that offsite copy of the data. Now, my personal opinion is having grandfather, father, son, or GFS copies of the data offsite. So these are actually active fulls sitting offsite, just in case. It's great to have incrementals and have a synthetic or a full chain sitting out there, but having that actual active full is absolutely going to guarantee that you're going to be able to go back to it. Now, this is also in the case that we're making sure we're testing that backup. Again, going back to testing, which is so mission critical to the overall encompassing data, and making sure that you guys can scale back up just like nothing ever happened.
Very good, very good. Jeremy, like to add any points there?
No, I think you covered that one pretty well, Michael.
Yeah, that's why I went to him first. I knew he would have our answer. Last question I'm seeing here is teachable moments for sure. I really like this question. their priority, right? Bad actors are getting better. I made an online purchase with Walmart.com as the distributor and the seller. Just today, I got a link to click in to secure my prize that I won for being the millionth customer. I mean, it was something crazy like that. So, and it looked very legitimate. But of course, I know I'm not that lucky, so deleted. But nevertheless, the question is, what self-awareness examples can you share besides simulating phishing attacks, endpoint security, and least privilege, et cetera? So, Jeremy, I'm going to send that over to you here to give us your thoughts on that.
All right. I'm not sure I follow this self-awareness example. Are you looking for what kind of self-awareness example are we looking for here? Something where we're aware of an attack? I mean, how to inform users. Okay. I think one of the best ways I informed users about security was in a board meeting one time. I brought 2 laptops and I gave a demo and I said, hey, look at this. We're going to pretend like you clicked on a phishing link. And I had one laptop over here. I said, here's the attacker laptop. Here's the victim laptop. You're the victim. We're going to pretend that you went ahead and clicked on this link. Now everybody get a real good look at that laptop there, and they did. And then I I hit enter and I put their picture up on the boardroom projector, and I said, there you go. There's some self-awareness for you. Be careful what you're clicking on. So I think we have to do things to drive the point home of how important it is to be diligent with phishing. I think you've mentioned something besides phishing attacks, but it's security awareness is all those things. Showing people how dangerous phishing attacks are and what to look for, and to constantly remind them. We do yearly security awareness training that, you have to check off the box. You went through the training, you watched the training. And I think we have to keep it pretty simple. For people, we don't want to go too deep where people don't understand what we're talking about. People can understand a phish, but they might not understand a Metasploit exploit. So we don't want to go down that path, but keep things simple. When we're talking in terms to inform users, just say, hey, by clicking on this, you can get exploited. We don't have to go much deeper than that for users. I hope that's helpful. Maybe not. If I can, if I can progress further than that for you, let me know. But
it certainly is, and awareness is difficult. I think we had a word earlier, exhaustive. Whatever it is, it's got to be repetitive, but there's a delicate balance there where it doesn't turn into noise and people don't read those emails, the security emails you're sending out to educate. But as everybody saw how we started this, is just raising awareness with some of the attacks that have been out there in the different sectors, and that's what you just constantly do. It's an uphill battle that you've got to be constantly diligent about. Michael, any last thoughts on that question before we wrap up?
Yeah, my last 2 cents is there's tons of verticals, right? There's so many different things that self-awareness can come from. When I think of self-awareness and at least the security perspective, on a grand scale, you always hear it once a year. Normally, Cyber Monday, Black Friday. It's all over the news. It's all everywhere. So everybody's trying to be security minded, and it can be done by some simple things, just by hovering over a link to make sure it's HTTPS instead of HTTP. There's just some very easy mitigation steps that can absolutely be taken to kind of make everybody self-aware, and just like everybody said here today, is repetitiveness is really the key. I think that's just like the military. 90 days of doing something, you're going to be very good at it, and it's going to be very burned into your brain, and that coefficient is going to be long term.
Yeah, great point. All right, that's all we have time with for Q&A today. I'm going to pass it back to Olivia here in just a second, but these 3 great looking gentlemen here, if you have any more questions, get a hold of one of them. They can, like I said, they can pull us in and we can certainly be happy to answer your questions. So Olivia, that's it for OTAVA today. We'll pass it back to you to wrap us up.
So I would like to thank all of you guys for participating and joining us today, as well as Jason Pullman, Michael Deemer, and Jeremy Pomeraning for presenting and answering our questions today. We hope today's presentation has been helpful for you and your organization. Again, this webcast was recorded and a copy of the presentation will be emailed to you. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, feel free to contact the OTAVA team at Carousel. Our contact information is displayed, so please don't hesitate to call or email us. Thank you again and have a great day.